"Dad, you won't be welcome here for Christmas." The words struck me colder than the December wind rattling the windows. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. The room was filled with golden light from the 12-foot Christmas tree Isabella insisted on every year. Every branch weighed down with ornaments I'd paid for, the scent of vanilla candles drifting lazily through the air. But all I felt was the chill tightening around my heart. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I remembered another Christmas, not so long ago, when Maria was still alive. The house had been filled with laughter that year. Her laughter, Michael's, even Isabella's forced giggle as she'd opened the ugly sweater Maria bought her, pretending she loved it. I'd carved the turkey at the head of the table, proud and tired and utterly content. Maria's eyes had found mine across the candlelight, and she smiled that knowing smile. I would have given anything to go back to that moment. But this year, there was no warmth. Just the steady, suffocating presence of my son and his wife, sitting on leather couches I'd helped them pick out, surrounded by silk curtains and polished floors that had all come from my second mortgage. I cleared my throat, hoping to break the ice. "I could make my turkey this year," I offered, forcing cheer into my voice. "The one with the sage stuffing your mother used to love. Remember, Michael? She always said it was better than her grandmother's." Isabella didn't bother to hide her annoyance. She reached for her phone, scrolling with sharp, impatient fingers. "My parents will never eat that," she muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Michael wouldn't meet my eyes. His wedding ring caught the light, a flash of gold on trembling hands. "Dad, unfortunately, you won't be welcome here for Christmas." The words came out rehearsed, as if he'd practiced them in front of the mirror, preparing to sever our last thread of family. I blinked. Why wouldn't I be welcome? He shrugged, eyes locked on the marble coffee table, another gift from me. "Isabella's parents are coming. They'd prefer if you weren't here. It's easier this way. You know how they are about tradition." "Tradition," I repeated, the word foreign in my mouth. "What about our tradition, Michael?" His face tightened. "Dad, please, don't make this harder than it has to be." I looked around, searching for some sign of the life I'd built here. Every inch of this house bore my fingerprints, every floorboard, every wall, every piece of furniture purchased with money I should have saved for retirement, for Michael, for the grandchildren I'd hoped to see grow up under this roof. But now, even my memories weren't welcome here. Isabella stood up, smoothing her designer skirt, her expression cold. "It's better if you leave now, Dennis." I turned to Michael, hoping for a flicker of regret, of resistance. Instead, he squared his shoulders, voice steady and final. "Dad, you need to leave now." I stood slowly, joints aching from years of work and worry, and moved toward the door. My hand found the knob, solid, cold, unfamiliar. Behind me, Isabella whispered, "Make sure he takes everything this time." My heart clenched, but I didn't let them see. I stepped out into the frozen Spokane night, the air burning my cheeks. As the door clicked shut behind me, I realized for the first time in my life, I was no longer part of this family. But that was nothing compared to what came next. The cold of that night followed me all the way home, clinging to my coat, my bones, my very soul. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the look on Michael's face, the way he'd refused to meet my gaze as he told me to leave. I wandered the quiet, empty rooms of my house, memories flickering in every shadow. I was still tracing my hand along Maria's old photo frame when the phone rang. I didn't recognize Isabella's number at first. For a split second, hope flared. Maybe Michael had changed his mind. Maybe there was some sliver of family left for me after all. But then I heard her voice, cool and crisp as broken glass. "Dennis, let's not make this any more difficult than it has to be." I steadied myself against the counter. Isabella, I just want to understand. All those years, you seemed happy enough with my cooking, my company. Do you remember the first year you and Michael moved in together? You cried over my tamales because they reminded you of your grandmother. You said it made you feel at home. There was a pause, then the sharp scrape of a chair in the background. That was before. Things are different now. My parents are coming, Dennis. They expect a certain atmosphere, a level of breeding and tradition you don't exactly bring to the table. Her words hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Breeding, tradition. I remembered Maria, always careful to make everyone feel included, no matter how much she had to bite her tongue. Isabella's tone made it clear I'd never truly belonged in this world of theirs. I swallowed the bitterness. I see. So I embarrass you now? She laughed softly, a sound with no warmth. Your kind of cooking is embarrassing for this house and for my parents. They didn't grow up with whatever it is you make. Spicy Mexican food, loud music, stories about laying tile. They're educated, Dennis. They talk about art and literature, not grout and power tools. My fists clenched, knuckles white. You forget where you came from, Isabella. There was a time you were grateful just to have a meal you didn't have to cook yourself. She cut me off, voice sharper. We were appreciative then. We needed you. Now we've outgrown all that. Some people know their place, Dennis. Maria did. She knew how to disappear when she wasn't wanted. That name, Maria, cut through me like a knife. I heard her laughter echoing in my mind, her gentle hand squeezing mine under the table. She'd never have allowed this kind of cruelty in her home. But she was gone, and with her, any trace of warmth these people ever had. Isabella continued, almost relishing the final blow. You're not family, Dennis. You're baggage, and it's time we stopped pretending otherwise. I stared at the far wall, at the faded photos of Christmases past. For years, I'd convinced myself that sacrifice was what held families together, that if I just gave a little more, time, money, pride, they'd finally see me as one of their own. Instead, I'd become a stranger in my own story, a ghost in the house I'd helped build. I said nothing more. My hand shook as I pressed the button to end the call. The silence afterward was deafening. I wandered back to the living room, eyes drawn to the picture of Maria on the mantel, her smile frozen in a happier time. What had I really gained with all my giving, and what, in the end, had it cost me? But what I would discover next would shake me even deeper. I sat alone at my kitchen table, the lamplight turning the paperwork around me into little islands of memory and regret. The cheap bottle of whiskey I'd bought months ago, saving it for some special occasion, was still unopened. Tonight, I wasn't celebrating anything. I was finally counting the true cost of all those years spent giving, sacrificing, believing that family was worth any price. $237,468. That's what you took from me, and that's not counting the little extras. The number stared up at me from the torn envelope in my hand. It wasn't just a total, it was an accusation. I had never really looked at it before, not all at once. Maybe I thought that if I kept the damage in the shadows, it wouldn't hurt so much. Maybe, deep down, I'd always known how much I'd lost, but the act of facing it would break me for good. I opened the old manila folder, the one Maria used to keep for taxes and Christmas card lists. Now it was stuffed with crumpled bank statements, yellowed receipts, faded checkbook stubs. I found the first transfer, $2,800, January 5 years ago. A payment to Wells Fargo, the mortgage I'd co-signed when Michael and Isabella swore they'd pay me back. Of course, they never did. I began to add it all up, month after month. $2,800 here, $500 for utilities there, an emergency $4,200 when Michael lost his job.
New furniture, the down payment. God, I'd actually sold Maria's wedding ring for that, telling myself she would have wanted it this way. Would she? I wasn't so sure anymore. My pen scratched out a running tally. Every so often, I'd stop and stare at a name on a check or a scanned photo. Michael's smiling face in front of the house I'd helped them buy. Isabella posing in the kitchen I'd paid to renovate. A birthday card from a year when I couldn't afford even a small gift for myself. For every entry, a memory surfaced. The time I sold my old truck for half its value just to cover a missed mortgage payment when Michael got behind. The Christmas I pawned my father's watch to buy Isabella the expensive stand mixer she had to have. Every time, I told myself it was only temporary, that they'd be grateful, that I was building something that would last. But gratitude never came. The requests only multiplied, each one more brazen than the last. I clicked through old emails on my laptop. Dad, can you spot us $1,500 for property taxes? Can you cover the water bill? Isabella's car broke down. Can you help? The tone changed over time, from polite to casual to entitled, as if my sacrifice was just another line item in their budget. $237,468. I wrote the number again, bigger, darker, underlining it until the pen nearly tore through the page.
That didn't count the little extras, the hundreds in groceries, the weekends spent fixing their leaky roof, the hours of free labor and advice that no one ever remembered. My eyes drifted to the photo of Maria, her smile soft and knowing. She'd trusted me to do right by our family, to keep them safe. But what would she think of me now? What had I really protected? Our son's happiness, or just his ability to take from me again and again? The whiskey bottle called to me, promising numbness. But I left it sealed. I wanted to feel this. I needed to, because somewhere along the way, I hadn't just lost my savings. They didn't just take my money. They took my dignity. With trembling hands, I reached for the automatic transfer form, the one that drained my account every month like clockwork. I tore it down the center, then again, shreds falling to the floor like ashes. My chest burned, not from pain, but from something fiercer. "It ends now," I whispered to the empty kitchen, my voice steady at last. But I had no idea how far this ending would go. The morning after I tore up the transfer form, the world outside was blanketed in white, heavy snow falling against the window. The city was silent, muffled, as if holding its breath. I made my coffee strong and black, letting the bitterness remind me this wasn't a dream. It was the first day of the rest of my life. Maria's voice echoed in my memory. "Don't let them turn you into a wallet, Dennis. Family gives, yes, but not at the cost of your soul." I'd ignored her gentle warning for years, believing love and sacrifice were one and the same. Now, with the truth laid bare, I was ready to honor her wisdom at last. I picked up the phone and dialed the bank. My hand was steady, my decision already made. "Customer service, this is Jennifer. How can I help you today?" "Yes, I need to cancel a recurring transfer," I said, my tone firmer than it had been in years. $2,800 on the 15th of every month.
Effective immediately. There was a pause as she typed. "I see the transfer to Wells Fargo. 5 years, always on time. May I ask why you're canceling, Mr. Flores?" I hesitated for a split second, then answered honestly. "Because it's destroying me. I can't do it anymore." She softened. "I understand. The transfer is canceled as of today. Is there anything else I can help you with?" "No," I said, and I meant it. "No, that's everything." I hung up, a strange sense of lightness blooming in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt the ground beneath my feet, solid, real, mine. Snow continued to fall, the world outside growing brighter by the minute. I watched the flakes drift past my window, thinking of Maria. I hoped, wherever she was, she could see what I was doing, that maybe, finally, I was standing up for myself, the man she'd always believed I could be. My phone buzzed. Michael's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Dad, the mortgage didn't go through. Is something wrong with the bank?" I kept my voice even. "No, Michael, nothing's wrong. Your next mortgage payment won't be coming from me." A stunned silence on the other end. "But, Dad, we need that. Isabella's parents, there's a dinner, and—" I cut him off, cold but not cruel. "You're a grown man, Michael. It's time you handle your own responsibilities. I won't be sending any more money." He started to protest, but I ended the call. I'd said everything that needed saying. Within minutes, my phone began to vibrate again, this time Isabella's number. I knew she wouldn't call unless she was desperate or angry. I answered, and her voice came sharp, all pretense dropped. "Dennis, the payment didn't go through. Fix it, now. My parents are expecting perfection this week, and you know how important this is for Michael's work." "No," I said calmly, "it's not my job to fund your lifestyle, Isabella. I've done enough." She hissed, "You owe us."
"After everything we've done for you," I laughed, a bitter sound. "What exactly have you done for me, Isabella?" Silence. For the first time, she had no answer. I hung up, letting the finality settle around me like the snow outside. For the first time in 5 years, my budget balanced. I could finally breathe. But little did I know, the storm was just beginning. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when Isabella's name lit up my phone. For a brief moment, I wondered if she'd call to apologize or at least pretend to care about what happened the day before. But the cold, clipped tone that greeted me on the other end erased any such hope. "Dennis, I need you to pick up my parents from the Spokane airport. Their flight lands at 2. Don't be late." I paused, letting her impatience hang in the air. "Isabella, have you forgotten what we talked about yesterday?" She cut me off, voice growing sharper. "Whatever that was, we need to be practical. My parents need a ride, and you're the only one with nothing to do. Just handle it." I could almost hear her rolling her eyes. In her world, my time belonged to her, my energy, my car, my silence. I flashed back to all those times I'd driven them to parties, fixed their leaky faucets, carried groceries up 3 flights of stairs, always with a smile, never once complaining. For years I told myself that's what family did. Show up, help out, swallow your pride. Now her next words felt like a slap. "Don't embarrass us, Dennis. My parents notice everything. Wear something decent, maybe the blue shirt you wore to Michael's graduation. And please, don't try to make conversation, just handle the luggage and let them ride in peace." I gritted my teeth, reminding myself to play along. "Of course, Isabella, I'll take care of it." She must have sensed my lack of enthusiasm. Her tone shifted, taking on that condescending edge I'd come to recognize. "Family helps each other, Dennis. That's what families do."
"But you're not really family, are you? You're more like support staff. You're not my rival. You're too weak to even be my rival." For a moment, I almost laughed at the audacity. She didn't see me at all, only what I could do for her, what I could provide. In that instant, I realized I'd spent years trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I had none. "Understood," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I'll make sure everything is perfect for your parents." She ended the call without another word. I stared at the phone, feeling a curious blend of anger and relief. For once, I didn't feel the need to explain myself, to chase their approval or gratitude. Instead, I felt a slow, determined fire building inside me. All those years of being their unpaid driver, their silent handyman, their family mascot, they'd never broken me, not really. They just hadn't seen who I really was. "This time, I'll really take care of it," I told myself, staring out at the falling snow. But not in the way they expected.
They thought I was powerless. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 3 hours, baggage claim. No Dennis. That's what Cody Jenkins would tell anyone who would listen by the end of that long, frigid afternoon. But for me, the hours passed in a rare kind of peace. While they stood shivering beside Carousel 3 at Spokane International, I sat in my kitchen, the warmth of the teapot steaming between my hands, watching snow slide down the windows and feeling lighter than I had in years. The phone started buzzing at 2:10 p.m., right on schedule. Isabella first, her number flashing insistently, again and again. I sipped my tea and turned the phone face down. For the first time, I didn't feel the reflexive need to answer. I remembered her earlier words. Family helps each other. Now she was discovering what it felt like when that help wasn't automatic, when the invisible servant simply stopped showing up.
By 2:30, the calls came in a steady, desperate rhythm. Cody, Catherine, even an unfamiliar number. Must have borrowed someone's phone. The messages grew more frantic with each ring. I imagined them scanning the crowd, faces tightening, voices growing sharp. In years past, I'd have dropped everything at a moment's notice, scrambled for my keys, braved the snow, shouldered luggage and humiliation just to keep the peace. I remembered the way Isabella used to smile with relief when I showed up, acting as if I was just another part of the scenery. I wondered if she was smiling now. At 3:15, the calls shifted from pleading to demanding. Isabella's last voicemail came through so shrill I could hear it even before pressing play. "Dennis, where are you? My parents have been waiting for hours. Do you have any idea what you're putting us through? Pick up your phone. This is not okay." I let the words fade, poured myself another cup of tea, and turned the radio a little louder. Outside, the street was quiet. Neighbors stringing Christmas lights, children laughing in the snow. Across town, the Jenkinses huddled in their coats, their holiday cheer frozen solid. By the time the 6th call came, I had nearly finished the crossword. Delayed gratification, 12 letters. I smiled at the irony. That's exactly what I was practicing, and it tasted better than any victory I'd known. Eventually, the call stopped. I pictured Cody's red face, Catherine's pinched lips, Isabella's mascara running in the cold. In the end, pride must have lost to pragmatism. They called a taxi, loaded their matching suitcases, and rode back through the icy streets in the back seat. No driver to greet them, no family to smooth the way. When they finally arrived, Cody slammed his fist on the kitchen table hard enough to rattle the china. 3 hours, he spat. Baggage claim. No Dennis. If he wants war, I'll give him war. I couldn't hear him from my side of the city, of course. But somehow, I felt the tremor. A new line had been drawn, and I'd been the one to make it. For the first time, I realized I was done being their servant. But even I didn't know how ugly their fight would get. Spokane businessman abandons elderly couple at airport during holiday storm. That was the headline on page 3 of the morning paper. I nearly dropped my mug when I saw my own name in black and white beneath it. There I was, Dennis Flores, age 62, branded as the villain of the week. The story was printed in tight columns, the font just large enough to burn itself into my memory. I read the opening line twice, disbelief souring into anger. According to the article, I had callously left an elderly couple stranded for hours at the airport in the middle of a dangerous winter storm. There was a picture, too, one I hadn't even known existed, lifted from my old company's website, now frozen in the unflattering glare of newsprint. Cody Jenkins's name appeared in nearly every paragraph. The article quoted him at length. We waited in the cold for hours, worried for our safety, after Mr. Flores failed to keep his word. At our age, this kind of neglect is dangerous. His wife, Catherine, was described as visibly shaken, but graceful under adversity.
The weather that day? The journalist described a relentless blizzard that had paralyzed the city. I looked out the window, bright sun on clean, dry snow. There hadn't been a blizzard in Spokane for weeks. The byline belonged to Patricia Morrison. I'd never met her, but I could picture her easily. Young, eager, probably handed my story by Cody over cocktails at the country club. I remembered Cody boasting once, "My connections go all the way from City Hall to the editorial desk." He hadn't been lying. The article never mentioned why I failed to appear, or the years I'd spent as their family's invisible driver and banker.
There was no mention of the money, the mortgage, the endless list of things I'd given up to keep their household afloat. The comment section was already a war zone. Disgusting. Elder abuse is never okay. I heard Dennis Flores is rich. He could have called them an Uber. Maybe there's more to the story, but this looks bad. Others offered a rare defense, but their voices were drowned out by outrage. The phone rang twice that morning. First my neighbor, then my barber, both wanting to know what really happened. I could hear judgment in their voices, a slight edge of doubt. The story was already spreading. In a town like Spokane, reputation traveled fast. I gripped the paper so hard it nearly tore. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with something sharper. Rage, yes, but also a clear, cutting sense of resolve. I saw what this was, an attack, orchestrated and precise. Cody was using every string he could pull, painting himself as a victim, me as the monster. He knew exactly what he was doing. I could almost hear his smug voice. "You want to play games, Dennis? Let's see who wins." My gaze fell on Maria's photo above the fireplace. I remembered her advice. Don't let anyone rewrite your story for you. I pressed my thumb hard into the paper, crumpling it in my fist. "They want war," I whispered to the empty room. "I'll give them war." I stood, spine straightening, anger crystallizing into purpose. I opened my laptop and started a new folder on my desktop. I called it 237468 Reasons Why. Inside, I began gathering every piece of evidence: bank statements, receipts, photos of every holiday and birthday I'd paid for, copies of every transfer. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about truth and about taking back my dignity, one file at a time. But as I started typing, I realized I would need more than proof. I would need a plan, and I would need to strike back where it hurt most. Let's see how they like the truth.
Maria's words echoed in my mind as midnight crept over Spokane, the city lights shimmering through my frosted kitchen window. No one can take away your truth, Dennis. I held on to that, drawing strength from her memory as I methodically set to work. Revenge wasn't enough. I wanted justice, and justice required proof. I pulled every statement from the 237,468 Reasons Why folder, organizing them by year, by amount, by the way each one chipped away at my future. The stack grew. Monthly mortgage payments, utilities, emails with subject lines like urgent, just until payday, one more favor. Every one of them was another link in the chain I'd worn for years. The printer hummed and spit out page after page, bank records, transfer receipts, even the listing for the wedding ring I'd pawned to keep their house from default. I highlighted every amount in yellow, thick lines tracing the blood and bone of my generosity. Each time I set down the highlighter, my hand trembled with something closer to anger than regret. I opened my email archive, scrolling back through years of digital begging and entitlement. There it was. Isabella's, "Thank you, Dennis, we couldn't have made it without you," morphing over time into, "We need you to transfer today," and finally, "It's your responsibility." I printed them all. Then came the phone recordings. Maria had once teased me for saving old voicemails, but now they were gold. Isabella's clipped, dismissive tone, Michael's mumbled requests, even a few drunken messages from Cody threatening consequences if I ever embarrassed their family. I labeled each folder meticulously:
Mortgage, utilities, car payments, emergency bailouts. I clipped together old family photos, Christmas trees, birthday cakes, Michael's new kitchen, annotating each with a yellow sticky note, paid by Dad. My desk became a crime scene, every piece of evidence a testimony to years of silent sacrifice. It took hours, but I didn't tire. If anything, I felt more awake than I had in months. The more I uncovered, the more my purpose sharpened. Finally, I sat back and looked at what I had created. 12 neat packets, each one a dossier thicker than a paperback novel. For every guest at Isabella's precious dinner, there would be a complete story, the real story. I slid the first sheet into the top of each packet. 237,468 reasons why, the truth they never told you. I imagined the expressions on their faces as they flipped through page after page, the silence that would fall as the numbers sank in, the lies unraveled. Not even Cody's citywide connections could dismiss this much evidence. As I finished, I placed each packet carefully into a briefcase, double-checking the contents. Then I set my best navy suit, the one Maria had chosen for me years ago, on the back of the chair. It hadn't seen the light of day since her funeral. Tomorrow, it would serve a different purpose. I lingered for a moment in the quiet, letting the weight of what I'd accomplished settle over me. For years, I'd accepted their version of the story. No more. The truth was mine, and tomorrow, everyone would know it. Tomorrow, I get my name back. I stood across the street from Michael and Isabella's house, the night air biting at my face as I watched guests arrive in their finest, arms full of gifts and bottles of wine. Their laughter floated over the snow, carried by memories of Christmases long ago. Christmases when Maria and I were welcomed with open arms, when my cooking and my stories were part of what made the holidays feel like home. But this year, I wasn't invited. I wasn't welcome. And this year, that was about to change. I gripped the handle of my briefcase and crossed the street, feeling strangely calm. Inside that case were 12 thick packets, 12 years of my life, my sacrifices, my truth. For the first time in years, I felt not like an intruder, but like someone finally coming home to claim what was rightfully his.
The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Isabella loved to show off how safe their neighborhood was. I stepped inside quietly, pausing in the entryway. The house glowed with golden light, the smell of expensive food and perfume mixing in the air. Laughter echoed from the dining room. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with certainty. I walked in, my best suit freshly pressed, the briefcase hanging at my side. 12 faces turned to stare at me, forks and wine glasses frozen mid-air. Cody's jaw clenched. Catherine's face drained of color. Michael's eyes widened in horror. Isabella was the first to find her voice. "Dennis, this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave, now." I smiled, calm as I could muster. "I hope you don't mind me joining your Christmas celebration." For a moment, no one spoke. I set the briefcase on the sideboard, snapping it open with deliberate care. I pulled out the 12 folders and began handing them, one by one, to the guests seated around the long, glittering table. The rustle of paper filled the silence. "Here's the down payment," I announced, my voice even. $47,000, my entire home equity loan. "Here's the kitchen, $18,000. That's the granite countertop Isabella just had to have." I laid the paperwork in front of Cody, then Catherine, then Michael, then their circle of friends, their accountant, their neighbors, even Patricia, the reporter who had written the hit piece about me. I continued. "And here, 60 payments, $2,800 each month, every month, for 5 years. That's $168,000. Add in the bills, the groceries, the emergencies, the cars, the little extras. It's $237,468. That's how much I gave to this family. Every dollar is documented, highlighted with receipts, emails, even voicemails. I watched as each guest paged through the evidence, faces changing from confusion to shock to quiet horror. Cody cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "This is a private family matter." I cut him off, voice steady. "Not anymore. You made it public when you put my face in the newspaper. I thought your friends and colleagues should know the truth." Isabella leapt to her feet, furious, eyes wild. "You have no right to be here. You're ruining our Christmas. How dare you come into our home?" I looked around at the guests, making sure everyone heard. "Let's see who really built this family's home. Every fork, every chair, every inch of this place, paid for with the money I sacrificed, the money you all conveniently forgot about. The only thing I got in return was exclusion and humiliation." Michael stood, face pale and trembling. "Dad, please." But it was too late. The truth was out. The guests began to murmur, voices rising with disbelief and accusation. A woman at the end of the table shook her head. "Isabella, is this true? You never mentioned any of this." Catherine tried to gather herself, stammering, We volunteered. We never—" I faced her with icy calm. "You accepted every cent, and when I finally stopped, you painted me as the villain." The room erupted. Some guests demanded answers. Others started packing their bags. Cody's face twisted with rage. Isabella screamed, "Get out! Get out!" But I stood my ground, letting the storm swirl around me. I had nothing left to lose, and for the first time, I had everything I needed. As the chaos grew, I stepped back into the hallway, listening to the panic, the accusations, the collapse of a carefully crafted lie. Let them try to put it back together. The night was only beginning, and so was my reckoning. The silence that followed my revelation was absolute. A silence so heavy it pressed on every chest in that golden dining room. Only the rustle of paper broke the hush as guests read, page after page, the evidence of betrayal laid bare before them. Every highlighted line was a nail in the coffin of the Jenkins social standing. A woman at the far end, pearls at her throat, and once a close friend of Catherine's, looked up, her face ashen. She threw the folder onto the table with a snap. "How could you let your daughter take advantage of this man?" Her voice was cold with disgust. "I can't believe I ever respected you." Others followed. The accountant shook his head, muttering about fraud and manipulation. Patricia, the reporter, blushed, eyes averted. The neighbor who had once gossiped over the fence stared at Isabella as if seeing her for the first time. The air was thick with judgment, a lifetime of reputation unraveling in minutes. Cody tried to speak, his bluster now nothing but a desperate whimper. "There's more to the story. He volunteered. He wanted—" "No one volunteers to be humiliated and used," snapped another guest, an elderly man with a cane. "You didn't just take his money, you took his dignity." Catherine buried her face in her hands and began to sob quietly. Isabella, red-eyed and shaken, slumped forward, her cheek pressed against the linen tablecloth as if she wished she could disappear. Michael, standing behind his chair, could not meet my gaze. I saw his lips tremble with the words he was too ashamed to speak. The pile of folders became a wall between the family and their guests. Years of carefully curated friendship collapsed in a single night. I watched as respect drained from the room, replaced by disbelief and revulsion. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, about decency, about the lines you do not cross, even for family. Some guests left early, barely managing a tight nod in my direction. Others lingered long enough to deliver their verdicts in person. "You did this to yourself," one woman hissed at Cody and Isabella as she gathered her coat. "Don't blame Dennis for telling the truth." As the noise grew, I realized I no longer felt anger or grief.
Instead, I felt something weightless, a clean, exhilarating freedom I hadn't known in years.
I was done being the villain in their story. Tonight, I had become the author of my own. Without another word, I walked toward the door, the echoes of raised voices and accusations following me down the hall. The cold air outside stung my cheeks as I stepped onto the porch, but it felt like a baptism. For the first time in 5 years, I was free, not just from their financial chains, but from the shame and silence I had carried alone. I stood for a long moment beneath the winter sky, breathing deep, listening as the chaos inside faded into the night. No more secrets, no more servitude. This was what freedom felt like. But even as I relished my victory, I knew the battle wasn't finished. Not yet. I heard what happened at the Flores' Christmas dinner. Unbelievable! I sipped my coffee in the corner booth of a small cafe, the low hum of morning chatter swirling around me. Even here, 2 tables over, my name and story had become the talk of Spokane. The fallout from that Christmas night had spread like wildfire, beyond the glowing windows of Isabella's perfect home, beyond the dinner guests, all the way into the heart of the city. On Facebook, the comments piled up by the hour. "What kind of daughter treats her father like that?" one read. "Disgusting display of greed." Others went further, tagging the Jenkinses and Michael in posts that quickly turned viral. Photos of the folders I had handed out made their way online, each yellow highlighted number dissected and shared. The tide had turned, and it swept the Jenkins-Flores family out to sea. Isabella had always relished attention. Her Instagram was filled with filtered photos of charity galas, brunches, and shopping sprees. Now, those same circles were buzzing for the wrong reasons. I heard from a neighbor that the Spokane Charity Ball, where Isabella was once a committee darling, quietly regretted to inform her she was no longer welcome. Catherine, who had planned a New Year's luncheon, found her RSVPs ignored, her phone calls met with icy politeness. The cost hit Cody fastest. His phone rang off the hook, not with congratulations, but with cancellations. A business partner withdrew from a real estate deal, citing negative publicity. Another cut off their contract, citing a need for trust and discretion in our community. The whispers that once surrounded me, the abandoned father, the alleged villain, now wrapped tightly around them. For Isabella, the humiliation was worst of all. She watched her carefully constructed world unravel, friends deleting her from group chats, acquaintances unfollowing her social accounts in droves. I imagined her face as she read the latest posts. "You used your own father like a bank and then kicked him out? For shame. Some people don't deserve forgiveness." Her voice was shaky when she called her mother that afternoon, tears streaming. "We're ruined, Cody, all because of your pride, your obsession with appearances. Look what it's cost us." Catherine tried to console her, but I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she too was terrified, afraid not only for her place in society, but for what Cody might do next. He became more irate with each passing day, stalking the house, slamming doors, muttering about revenge. I watched all this unfold from a quiet distance, neither gloating nor pitying. This was not a victory to celebrate. It was justice, plain and simple. The town that once revered the Jenkinses now shunned them, not because of what I'd revealed, but because of the undeniable truth behind it. For years, Isabella had boasted about her family's connections. Now, those same connections were their undoing. The final blow came late one evening when a prominent member of the business community approached me at the grocery store. He leaned in, voice low. "You did the right thing, Dennis. People like them, this city needed to know." I simply nodded.
There was nothing left to say, but in the Jenkins house, chaos reigned. Cody, too proud to admit defeat, shouted above the clamor, "I'm going to sue Dennis. I'll see him in court for slander and defamation. He's ruined us with his lies." Even as he threatened lawsuits, everyone could see the truth. It wasn't my evidence that had ruined them, it was their own actions. I walked out into the wintry night, the weight of their world no longer on my shoulders.
But I knew Cody wasn't finished, not by a long shot. "We're taking you to court for defamation and emotional distress." Cody's voice was flat, all pretense of charm gone. He sat across the polished oak table from me, his eyes flashing with barely concealed anger. On either side of him, his attorney, a sharp-suited man named Bernard, clicked his pen with impatience, already playing out his victory speech in his mind. I had expected this. Cody was never going to let humiliation slide without a fight. He'd threatened me with lawyers before, promising to teach me a lesson the legal way. Now he seemed certain the court would force me to pay for his pride. Bernard began the meeting with the bravado of a man who thought he had already won. "Mr. Flores, my clients allege that you have spread malicious falsehoods, damaging their reputation and causing them severe emotional distress. We will be seeking significant damages and a public retraction. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" I reached for my briefcase, feeling the weight of every folder I had so carefully prepared. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "I'd like to submit these documents into evidence." Bernard arched an eyebrow, but accepted the files. The first folder contained 5 years of bank statements, each transaction highlighted: mortgage payments, utility transfers, lump sums for emergencies. I watched his eyes widen as the totals added up. Next, I handed over printed emails, requests for money, promises to repay, thinly veiled threats when I hesitated.
Then came the phone records, the voicemails with Isabella's voice. "Dennis, it's your responsibility. If you really cared about family, you'd do this for us." I watched Cody squirm as his own words, harsh and unfiltered, filled the room in black and white. Bernard's confidence began to crack. "You're claiming all these payments were made at my client's request?" "I'm not claiming anything," I answered. "I'm showing you exactly what happened. Every dollar, every date, every email and call. You're welcome to verify it all." The room was quiet except for the turning of pages. Cody's face reddened. Isabella, brought in by speakerphone, was silent now, her earlier bravado replaced by something closer to fear. Bernard tried to regain control. "Regardless, your actions at the Christmas dinner were clearly meant to embarrass and damage their standing in the community." I looked him in the eye. "All I did was share the truth with people who deserved to know it. I didn't lie. I didn't embellish. I provided documented facts. If telling the truth is defamatory, I'm curious what the court will say when they see this." He paused, shuffling through the folders again. "If these documents are real," he hesitated, then glanced at Cody, uncomfortable. "It's your clients who may be liable for financial exploitation, undue influence, and possibly elder abuse." The words landed like a blow. For a moment, the only sound was the distant traffic outside the law office. Cody bristled, opening his mouth to object, but Bernard cut him off. "I'm going to need to review all of this before we proceed further." On the speaker, Isabella's voice quavered. "What does that mean? Are we in trouble?" Bernard didn't answer right away. I watched the color drain from Isabella's face as the possibility sank in. All those years of taking, of pushing, of treating me like a bottomless well, they had left a paper trail, and now the law was on my side. As I gathered my things to leave, Cody glared at me, his eyes hard and wounded. But I saw something else in his posture now, doubt, and just a flicker of fear. The battle wasn't over, but the ground beneath them was shifting, and for the first time, they knew it. "Did you ever put your father's name on the loan papers?" The question landed like a stone in the cramped conference room. The lawyers' voices had been circling for nearly an hour, but that sentence cut through everything. My attorney's tone was gentle but clear, looking directly at Michael, who was hunched over the table, hands knotted, eyes darting to avoid mine. I remembered the day Michael and Isabella bought this house.
I'd stood in the corner of the closing office, watching my son sign his name over and over, each signature another link in the chain that would bind me to this family's debts. I paid the down payment, covered the mortgage, but not once did anyone ask me to sign anything, not even a gift deed. I was useful, but never officially welcome. Michael cleared his throat. No, Dad never signed anything. It's all in my name and Isabella's. Isabella sat rigid beside him, lips pressed into a stubborn line. The money was a gift, she insisted, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. He gave it to us freely. We never forced him. My lawyer leaned in, not unkindly. Dennis, did you ever sign any document giving away those funds as an irrevocable gift? Any letter, contract, or statement, written or verbal? I shook my head. Never. Every dollar was sent with the understanding it was for the family's future, my grandchildren's home, not a handout, not a gift to be thrown back in my face. A brief, awkward silence settled over the room. Cody, who had been aggressive at the start, stared at his hands, saying nothing. Catherine's shoulders shook quietly. Michael looked at me with a mixture of shame and fear. The opposing attorney cleared his throat.
Given that there is no documentation of a legal gift, and considering the substantial sum involved, over $200,000, my clients are exposed to the risk of a counterclaim, especially in light of the evidence already presented regarding the financial transfers, the communications, and the recent events. Michael's lawyer cut in, urgency in his voice. I strongly recommend you consider a settlement, perhaps a voluntary sale of the property, split the proceeds, avoid a lengthy and public legal battle. If Mr. Flores were to pursue reimbursement, it's unlikely a judge would view this as a simple family loan, given the sheer scale and the circumstances. Isabella's face drained of color. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "All we wanted was to build a home. Why are you doing this, Dennis?" Cody finally looked up, his bluster long gone. "Because we crossed a line," he muttered. "We're going to lose everything." Catherine buried her face in a tissue, her quiet sobs filling the room. Michael said nothing, but his shoulders sagged in defeat. For the first time, the power dynamic had shifted entirely. Years of manipulation, of exclusion, of treating me as a bottomless wallet, they were all crashing down. Not because I shouted or threatened, but because I brought the truth and the law to bear. I watched as the family I had once fought to protect considered their options: public humiliation in court or a quiet, bitter surrender. The meeting ended with more silence than words. As I gathered my papers, I caught Michael's eye. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the boy he once was, the one who used to run to me, not away from me. Outside in the hallway, my attorney nodded. "They'll sell," he said softly. "They have no other choice." And so, the house I had paid for would finally be untangled from my name and my heart. The reckoning was almost complete.
Your house is now officially in foreclosure. I can still picture the envelope, stark, government-issued, no warmth or comfort in the typeface, lying in a pile of unread mail on Michael and Isabella's expensive marble countertop. There were no Christmas cards mixed in that stack this year, no party invitations, not even a postcard from one of Isabella's old brunch friends. Just silence and that single letter. It was the kind of document that doesn't just end a chapter, it buries a life. Michael was the first to read it. His hands trembled as he opened the notice, lips moving as he tried to make sense of the legal jargon. The letter was unfeeling, cold as the Spokane winter. Final notice. Your property will be foreclosed upon in 30 days. Balance due, $8,400. Failure to bring the account current will result in public auction. He sank to the floor, the world spinning around him, and for the first time in years he sobbed openly, a broken, keening sound that filled the empty house. The job he'd promised to find after I stopped the payments had never materialized.
Months of resumes, a handful of interviews, all ending the same way. Polite rejection, doors closed, opportunities gone. Isabella stood in the hallway, arms folded, her face a mask of bitterness. "You said you'd take care of us," she spat. "You said we'd never lose this house. Was it all a lie, Michael? Did you ever plan to make something of yourself, or were you always just waiting for your father to bail us out again?" The words hung in the air, ugly and sharp. There was no more pretense, no more family unity. Isabella's social world had crumbled. Friends had quietly unfollowed her, the charity invitations vanished, her name whispered only in pity or disgust. Catherine, who had once floated through life on a cloud of gentle condescension, sat huddled in the den, her phone buzzing with news she no longer wanted. "I can't show my face at the club," she moaned. "People are saying things, terrible things.
They say we took advantage. They say we're leeches." Even Cody, who had ruled his family with a kind of blunt pride, was silent now. His reputation in Spokane's business circles was destroyed, contracts canceled, former partners refusing to take his calls. He stomped through the house in a rage, then collapsed in a chair, defeated. For once, he had no one to blame but himself. But it was Michael I watched most closely, through the recollections of that day. He wandered through the house like a ghost, pausing in the rooms I had paid for, touching the granite countertops, staring at the silk curtains, sitting on the edge of a bed that would soon belong to strangers. He saw it all for what it was, not a home, but a hollow monument to pride and debt. He remembered, as did I, the promises he'd made back when things were good. Promises to pay it all back, Dad, I swear. To make me proud, to build something for his children. Now there were no more children's voices in the halls, no laughter, no future here. Just a cold, echoing emptiness. Late that night, after Isabella had gone to bed angry and Catherine had locked herself in the guest room, Michael sat in the middle of the living room, clutching the foreclosure notice to his chest. He rocked back and forth, tears streaking his face. I heard later that he wept like a child, all pretense stripped away. When the sun finally rose, he knew what he had to do. There was only one person left who might listen. He wiped his eyes, put on an old jacket, and left the house, foreclosure letter in hand, a last scrap of hope folded up in his pocket. He was coming to see me. "Dad, I'm sorry for everything." The words hung in the air, trembling in the winter dark. I opened the door to find Michael standing there, shoulders slumped, foreclosure letter in hand, eyes swollen and red from sleepless nights. The porch light behind me threw a circle of warmth across the threshold, but he stood half in shadow, uncertain whether he was still welcome. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I saw in him the boy he used to be, coming home with a scraped knee, hoping for comfort. Now he was a grown man, but the hurt and shame on his face made him look years younger. I stepped aside. "Come in, Michael." He shuffled into the living room, gaze flicking over the space. It was humble but clean, touched by Maria's presence in every photo and trinket. I offered him a seat, and for a long minute we sat in silence, listening to the soft hum of the old heater. The quiet was thick with things unsaid. Finally, he looked at me, voice hoarse. "Dad, I'm sorry. For everything. For Christmas, for letting Isabella and her family treat you that way. For taking so much and never asking how you were doing. I was so lost. I thought I could fix it, but I just made it worse." He put the foreclosure notice on the table, hands shaking. "We're losing everything. I tried to hold it together, but I failed. Isabella blames me. Her parents, they hate me now. I don't know what to do. I don't even know who I am anymore." I listened, letting his words settle. When I finally answered, my voice was steady. "Michael, forgiveness isn't about forgetting. I let go of my anger for my own sake, not yours. But forgiveness doesn't mean fixing what you broke.
I can't erase the choices you made. Only you can decide who you want to be now." He nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. "It was always so much pressure. Isabella, her father. I thought if I kept everyone happy, I'd be enough. But I lost you along the way." I reached across the table, resting my hand on the foreclosure notice. "I know what it's like to lose yourself for other people. I did it for years."
But you have to decide, Michael. Are you going to keep running from your mistakes or finally face them? He looked at me with new understanding. I want to try. I want to be better. I don't know how. Start by taking responsibility, I said quietly. Not for their approval, not for the house, not even for me, but for yourself. That's the only way forward. He rose, straightening his jacket as if it suddenly weighed 100 pounds. Thank you, Dad, for letting me say this. I don't expect anything else. He started for the door, pausing to look back one last time. The yellow light cast his shadow long and thin across the entryway. I watched him leave, wondering if the man he might become would ever find his way home again. When the door closed, I sat alone in the gentle warmth, the silence pressing in. Was I a fool for loving so much, for sacrificing, for hoping even now? Or was I simply a father, unwilling to give up on his son? On the kitchen table, bills and legal documents waited, unpaid and unresolved. The past was behind me, but the future was still uncertain. "You gave me away, Michael. You didn't lose me." Those words came back to me as I passed Michael's house, now hollow and stripped bare, the echoes of his former life swirling like dust in the empty rooms. The windows that once glowed with expensive Christmas lights were dark, the driveway empty, a for sale sign leaning askew on the front lawn. Only the faint sounds of moving men and hurried footsteps remained. Inside, everything of value had been sold off or packed away. Furniture, electronics, even the silk curtains Isabella once insisted they needed. The grand kitchen now stood barren, its granite counters gleaming under the stark light, devoid of laughter or comfort. Boxes lined the hallways, marked for storage or donation, the detritus of a family that had imploded under the weight of its own pride. "You gave me away, Michael. You didn't lose me." Michael sat on the floor, his back against a wall, staring at the space where his daughter's playhouse had once stood. His little girl tugged at his sleeve, tear-streaked cheeks pressed into his shoulder. "Daddy, can we go to Grandpa's house? I miss him. I miss Grandma's stories." Isabella, standing near the door with her suitcases, finally broke the silence. Her voice was flat, empty. "I loved the house, Michael. I loved what it represented. Success, security, the life I always wanted. But I don't love this. Not the struggle, not the mess. I'm leaving. My parents have offered to help me start over. Without you." He didn't argue. He just looked at her, hollow-eyed, as she walked out carrying nothing but what she'd brought into the marriage, a suitcase and her pride. As the car pulled away, Michael's daughter cried harder. He tried to comfort her, but his arms were as empty as the rooms around him. For the first time, he was left with nothing but himself. No house, no wife, no illusions. I watched all this unfold from the sidewalk, unseen, unneeded, but no longer burdened by obligation or resentment. I had done what I could. I had given, forgiven, and let go. Later, sitting in my quiet kitchen, I turned over my phone to see a message from Rosa. "Sunday dinner, kids want you there." I smiled, feeling warmth return to a part of my heart I thought had frozen over. For so long, I had chased the approval of people who only saw me as useful. Now, I had family who truly wanted me in their lives, not because of what I could provide, but simply because I was me. Michael's pain, his sense of loss, was real, but in that loss there was a small flicker of hope, a chance to rebuild, to start again, if only he chose it.
I looked at the empty table in front of me, then at Maria's photograph on the mantel. The past was gone. The stage was cleared. It was finally time for something new.
Wouldn't miss it for the world, Rosa. The words felt easy, honest, lighter than anything I'd said in years. I texted her back and set my phone down, letting the glow of that invitation warm me from the inside out. Maria once told me, family is the place that always wants you back. For so long, I thought I had lost that place forever. Tonight, I would learn how wrong I'd been. Rosa's house was buzzing with life, kids shouting, laughter bouncing down the hallway, the scent of roasted chicken and cinnamon wafting from the kitchen. I stepped inside, shrugging off my coat, and was instantly swallowed in hugs. My niece pressed a crayon drawing into my hand. "It's you, Uncle Dennis, and us at the park," she announced, beaming. I let myself be swept along by the noise and the comfort, accepting a plate at the big dining table. The room was simple but alive. Handmade decorations, a chipped ceramic bowl, the mark of hands that cared more about presence than perfection. Rosa patted my arm and winked. "You sit here, right by the mashed potatoes, where Maria always used to park you." I couldn't help but laugh. Dinner was a blur of stories and jokes. My grandnephew launched into a detailed retelling of his science fair, complete with wild gestures and a proud display of his ribbon. The younger ones begged me for the Christmas story, the one about how their great-aunt Maria used to sneak extra tamales under the table for them. Their mother shook her head, feigning sternness, but her eyes twinkled with delight. As the meal stretched on, I felt something shift deep inside me. I was not a guest or an obligation here. I belonged. I was missed when I was absent, welcome when I showed up, cherished for who I was, not for what I gave or what I could provide. For the first time in 5 long years, I allowed myself to truly settle into the moment. Somewhere between dessert and coffee, Rosa squeezed my hand. "We're glad you're here, Dennis. You know, the kids were counting down the days."
You make every holiday feel like home. Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. I pressed her hand and let the emotion come. There was no shame in it, not here. 5 years lost, but I found myself again, I whispered, almost to Maria, almost to myself. After dinner, the family drifted to the living room. The kids sprawled on the floor with games and toys. I sat by the fireplace, cradling a mug of hot cocoa, and gazed at the photos on the mantel. Rosa and her husband, the kids in Halloween costumes, Maria's kind smile forever frozen in a black and white frame. For a long, quiet moment, I let my heart ache and heal at the same time. "You'd be proud, love," I said softly, my voice nearly lost in the gentle chaos of family all around me. Outside, winter pressed against the window panes, but inside, warmth and love filled every corner. I wasn't a fool for loving or for hoping. I was simply home. The whiskey tasted like freedom, and the future looked bright. For years, I'd sat in my quiet kitchen, sipping cheap whiskey alone, letting regret and loneliness swirl in my glass. But tonight, the amber liquid glowed in the lamplight, and I lifted it not in mourning, but in celebration. The weight that had pressed on my chest for so long was finally gone. I leaned back in my new armchair, paid for with my own money, in my own home, freshly painted by my own hands. The cracked porch had been repaired, the flickering light bulb finally replaced. The walls that once echoed with silence now rang with music. I'd signed up for guitar lessons at the senior center, stumbling through the chords with a room full of new friends, laughing at our mistakes. Rosa teased that I was going to serenade her on our next trip, and I'd already circled dates for a weekend road trip to the coast. My days were full. I joined the senior hiking club, tried Tai Chi in the park, hosted game nights with neighbors I'd never really spoken to before.
There was a woman named Barbara who taught me how to make bread from scratch, and a retired librarian who gave me stacks of mystery novels. But the biggest change was inside me. For so long, I'd let other people define my worth, whether I was invited or excluded, whether my cooking was good enough, whether my sacrifices were noticed. Now I was done chasing approval. I lived for myself and the people who truly cared. When the local community group invited me to give a talk about justice and forgiveness and family, I hesitated at first. But then I thought about Maria, how she'd always said our stories matter, even the painful ones. So I stood in front of a room full of strangers and spoke my truth, about being taken for granted, about the strength it took to say enough, and about the peace that comes when you let go. Afterward, a woman approached me, her eyes shining. She reached out and hugged me tight. "You changed my life, Dennis," she whispered. "I've been letting my own family walk all over me for years, but tonight I found my courage." I blinked back tears, humbled and grateful. It was the kind of connection I'd once believed I would never have again. That evening, as I washed up the mugs from my little gathering, I found a letter in my mailbox. The return address was the Spokane Senior Center. Inside was a handwritten note from the program director. "Dear Dennis, your story touched so many. Thank you for reminding us that family isn't just about blood, but about respect and choice. We're glad you're part of our community." I set the letter on the kitchen table, next to my old guitar and my travel notebook filled with plans. I poured one last sip of whiskey and stepped onto my newly fixed porch, breathing in the night air. Freedom isn't just the absence of pain, it's the presence of hope. For the first time in years, my life was truly my own, and I couldn't wait to see what came next.
You inspired me to stand up for myself. That phrase came up again and again in the days and weeks that followed my talk at the senior center. At first, it surprised me. After a lifetime spent quietly doing what was expected, being inspirational felt like a stranger's suit. But then the messages poured in. Handwritten cards, emails, comments on community Facebook pages. Some were simple. "Thank you for your honesty. I needed to hear that someone else survived being cast aside." Others were heart-wrenching. "I finally told my son I wouldn't co-sign another loan. It felt terrifying, but I slept better than I have in years." Many simply said, "Because of you, I dared to say no for the first time." Reporters reached out, asking me to share my story for local papers and radio shows. At first, I was hesitant. I had always been a private man, and the attention felt uncomfortable. But then I thought of Maria, how she'd always believed in telling the truth, even when it hurt. And so I agreed. My story appeared in the Community Resilience section of the Spokane Review, and before I knew it, I was invited to speak at support groups, charity events, and senior luncheons. Everywhere I went, people lined up to share their own tales of quiet endurance, of boundaries finally set, of dignity reclaimed. Some were teary, some defiant, all grateful. One day, at a neighborhood park gathering, a woman approached me with her teenage daughter. "This is Dennis, honey, the man I told you about. He helped me understand that being family doesn't mean being a doormat." She squeezed my hand. "I just wanted to say thank you. You changed our lives." At the senior center, I sat with a small circle of friends, sharing coffee and laughter. A few had become my closest confidants, our stories weaving together into a tapestry of strength and second chances. The old shame I used to feel, the sense of having failed as a father, as a man, faded into something gentler, understanding, even pride.
The most unexpected moment came at a local library event. As I packed up my notes, a little boy tugged on my sleeve. "Excuse me, sir," he said shyly. "My grandpa says you're a hero. He said you taught him to say no to people who don't treat him right." The boy's eyes were wide with admiration. I knelt beside him, heart swelling. "Your grandpa is the real hero," I told him. "He's teaching you what matters most." For so long, I'd chased justice only for myself. But as I looked around, a room full of people empowered to reclaim their lives, families mending, courage spreading like ripples in a pond, I realized something powerful. Justice, once claimed, doesn't stay small. It radiates outward, offering hope to everyone who sees it. I walked home that night under a sky bright with stars, a gentle smile on my face.
For the first time, my story wasn't just about loss or even revenge. It was about belonging, dignity, and the strength to change. I'd set out to reclaim my life. I'd ended up helping others reclaim theirs. For the first time in years, I was truly home. It was a feeling I thought I might never know again, not after so many cold Christmases spent wandering city streets, watching windows glow with the warmth of families I believed I'd lost forever. But here I was, standing in my own kitchen, sleeves rolled up, the air alive with the scent of sage and roasting turkey. Around me, the house hummed with laughter. Rosa was at the stove, orchestrating side dishes with the ease only she possessed. My nieces and nephews darted in and out, vying for a taste of the stuffing before it made it to the table. Friends, neighbors, old classmates, even a few from the senior center, filled the small rooms with stories and good-natured teasing.
As I basted the turkey, I remembered Maria, her gentle touch guiding my hands, her whispered reminders to always use a little extra butter for luck. Her memory was here, woven into every corner. The quilt on the sofa, the Christmas ornaments she'd collected, the battered family cookbook with her handwriting in the margins. I smiled, feeling her presence not as a loss, but as a blessing. When the food was finally ready, we gathered around the table, a patchwork of people who had chosen each other, who had weathered storms and emerged stronger together. I looked out over their faces, grateful for every laugh, every wrinkle, every voice that filled the silence I used to fear. I served my famous turkey with sage stuffing, and the room erupted in cheers. The children declared it even better than last year, and Rosa winked at me across the table. Conversation flowed easily, the old wounds and sorrows faded into the background. As dessert was passed around, I stood and lifted my glass. The room quieted, all eyes turning to me. I cleared my throat, words trembling just a little. To real family, I said, chosen and earned. To the people who see us, not just for what we give, but for who we are. To forgiveness and to the courage it takes to start again. And to Maria, whose love taught me that home isn't a place, it's the people who want you at their table. A chorus of "Hear, hear" rose up, glasses clinking, laughter spilling into the candlelight. I sat down, feeling whole in a way I hadn't in decades. Later, after the last dish was washed and the children bundled into pajamas, I stepped outside. The night was cold, stars sharp above the rooftops, but my heart was warm, filled with the joy of belonging. Through the window, I could see my family. Rosa tucking a blanket over my niece, friends chatting quietly, the remnants of a meal well enjoyed.
It was a new chapter, one I had earned by refusing to give up on myself, by demanding respect, by opening my arms to those who loved me. This Christmas, I was not an outsider. I was not a wallet, a servant, or a shadow. I was Dennis Flores, father, brother, friend, and finally at peace. And as the first snowflakes of the season drifted down, I welcomed them, not with loneliness, but with hope. Surrounded by laughter, light, and real family, I knew at last I was home. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.